It was a warm Thursday afternoon in a quiet suburban town just outside of Washington, D.C. The streets buzzed with the gentle hum of traffic, school buses easing into their final drop-offs, and neighbors trimming their hedges or chatting on porches. On the surface, it was the kind of neighborhood where people waved when they passed by, where barbecues filled the air with sweet smoke on weekends, and kids pedaled through the streets without fear. But sometimes, even in places like this, the calm hides an undercurrent of assumptions, silent judgments, and quiet prejudices waiting to boil over. That afternoon, two events, seemingly unrelated, were about to unfold in ways no one expected, and they would shake people's beliefs, challenge reputations, and bring out truths buried under layers of silence and authority. At the heart of one of those events was a man named Marcus Reed. He was tall, calm, and dressed simply in dark jeans and a buttoned shirt. With his soft-spoken manner and kind eyes, he might have been mistaken for a teacher, a coach, or a quiet neighbor who mostly kept to himself. But what no one around him knew, not the gas station attendant who nodded as he paid for fuel, not the woman who smiled as he held the door open for her, and certainly not the two police officers watching him from across the parking lot, was that Marcus wasn't just any man. He was a federal agent. More specifically, Marcus was part of the Department of Homeland Security, working in a specialized intelligence division that handled sensitive operations, including domestic threats. And although he wasn't in uniform, his credentials were in his glove compartment, his work badge tucked inside his jacket pocket, and his laptop inside the locked trunk, filled with files and intelligence he was due to present in the Capitol. That evening, he had been driving down for a classified meeting. Nothing too dramatic, just a standard debriefing. But as he pulled into the gas station, his attention shifted slightly. A black SUV had followed him for 3 blocks, and though he tried not to overthink it, his training wouldn't let him ignore it. Something was off. When he got out to pump gas, he noticed 2 uniformed officers watching him from the adjacent lot. They hadn't followed him in, but they looked like they were waiting. He kept his body language neutral. No sudden moves. No aggressive stares. Just calm. After all, Marcus had been through far worse situations in his life. He'd worked undercover in dangerous cities, tracked drug smuggling routes across borders, and handled threats most civilians would never even hear about. But what happened next wasn't a covert op. It was something far more frustrating and far more personal. "Sir," one of the officers said as they approached, "we need to speak with you." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "About what?" The taller cop, Officer Nolan, glanced at the car. "There's been a report about a vehicle, matching this description being involved in a theft earlier today. We're going to need you to step away from the vehicle while we investigate." Marcus froze for a second. He knew the protocol. He also knew that in moments like these, saying too much or too little could go very wrong. Still, he responded calmly, "You're mistaken. This is my car and I haven't been anywhere near. We'll sort it out." Officer Nolan cut him off. "But we're going to need your keys, now." Across town, another scene was unfolding on a crowded city bus. An elderly woman stood near the front, clutching a small handbag with one hand and her swollen belly with the other. She looked exhausted, beads of sweat clinging to her temples as the bus jolted forward again. Passengers sat silently, avoiding her eyes. No one moved. No one offered a seat except for one person. A black teenager, probably no older than 17, looked up from his phone and immediately stood up. "Ma'am, please take my seat," he said, motioning with a gentle smile. She looked stunned, almost embarrassed, but grateful. "Thank you, sweetheart," she whispered. He just nodded and stood near the door, holding onto a railing as the bus kept moving. He didn't know that a woman seated nearby had been watching everything, and he definitely didn't know what she had quietly slid into his backpack a few stops later. A handwritten note folded in 4, sealed with a sticker that simply read, "For you." He wouldn't open it until hours later, and when he did, it would change everything. Back at the gas station, things were getting heated. "I'm going to ask you one more time," Officer Nolan said sharply, now with his hand hovering near his holster. "Give us the keys." Marcus slowly reached into his jacket and pulled out his wallet. "I can show you my ID," he said, voice even. "I work for the Department of Homeland Security. Let's not escalate something that's already off track." But before he could finish, the second officer lunged, grabbing his wrist. In an instant, Marcus was forced against the side of his own car, arms twisted behind his back, his credentials falling to the ground, unnoticed. The gas station attendant froze. A woman filling up nearby gasped and stepped back. Phones came out. Cameras began recording. One woman whispered, "He didn't do anything." Marcus didn't resist. He knew better. His heart was steady, but inside a fire had started burning, not just from the humiliation, but from the realization that even now, with all his credentials, experience, and training, he could be reduced to just another suspicious black man in the eyes of people who didn't bother to ask. The officers found nothing suspicious. No weapons, no stolen items, no evidence of any crime. But that didn't stop them from impounding the vehicle for further investigation and leaving Marcus standing on the curb, still cuffed, now furious. At the station, as they began typing up the incident report, Officer Nolan frowned as he flipped through Marcus's wallet again, and then his face went pale. We've got a problem," he mumbled. "What kind?" the desk sergeant asked. "This guy. He's not just a DHS agent, he's a senior analyst. High clearance. Like, real high." The room went silent. Meanwhile, Marcus sat in the back of the squad car, watching through the glass as the officers whispered and panicked. He wasn't smiling, but he wasn't angry anymore either. He was calculating. On the other side of town, the teenage boy finally pulled the note from his bag after school. He opened it slowly, reading the careful handwriting. As he read, his eyes widened, his mouth parted slightly, and his fingers trembled, because the note didn't just thank him. It offered him a scholarship, a future, and a name, someone powerful, who wanted to meet him. But for now, neither he nor Marcus knew how their stories would connect, or how a single act of kindness and a single act of injustice would collide in ways that neither of them expected. And as the sun set over the city, both of them stood at the edge of decisions that would test them, expose others, and reveal truths that had been hidden in plain sight. What happened next was just the beginning. Marcus sat silently in the back of the squad car, hands resting calmly on his lap, though his mind was racing. He could see through the tinted window as the officers exchanged quick glances with the station sergeant. They weren't saying much, but their body language said enough. The moment they realized who he really was, the tension in the room shifted. The smug certainty was gone. Now there was hesitation, concern, maybe even fear. But Marcus wasn't interested in revenge. He'd seen worse. He'd lived through operations overseas where a mistake could cost lives. This wasn't about bruised pride. It was about something deeper. A pattern, a system, the kind of thing that happened too often to people who didn't have a badge in their pocket or clearance in Washington. The question now wasn't whether they'd release him. It was what they would try to cover up before doing it. Still cuffed, he replayed the entire stop in his mind. The SUV that had tailed him, the officer's oddly rehearsed tone, the aggressive insistence even after he identified himself. Something about it didn't sit right. It didn't feel like a routine mistake. It felt targeted. And if it was, then someone wanted to stop him from getting to that briefing in D.C. Back on the other side of town, the teen, his name was Jalen Morris, stood outside his apartment building with the note still in hand. His fingers ran over the words again and again. "You have no idea how much that small kindness meant. I work for a foundation that helps students like you. Kind, respectful, overlooked. We want to sponsor your future. Reach out. You're not invisible." Jalen couldn't believe it. He kept flipping the paper over, looking for a catch, some sign it was fake. But the number was real. The foundation had a name, and when he checked online, it was listed right there. Legitimate, with testimonials and news articles. A woman named Evelyn Brooks had written the note, and apparently she wasn't just anyone. She sat on the board of several scholarship programs and was the founder of a mentorship initiative for underserved youth. Jalen wasn't used to things like this. He was smart, respectful, but quiet. In school, he mostly kept to himself. Teachers liked him, but he wasn't the kind of student people rushed to help. His mom worked 2 jobs. His older brother had dropped out. College seemed like something other kids talked about, something people with connections or money could dream about. But now, this note had changed something. Not just hope, but possibility. But while Jalen's world was opening up, Marcus's world was being examined under a microscope. Inside the station, the shift supervisor finally approached the squad car and opened the door. "Agent Reed," he said carefully, "we're going to get this straightened out." Marcus stepped out slowly, saying nothing. The cuffs were removed, without eye contact. A murmur of apology floated in the air, but no one said the words directly. No one explained why the officers hadn't radioed in to confirm his ID. No one admitted the car had been impounded without a legal warrant. They just offered him coffee and awkward silence. He declined both. One officer finally tried to speak. "We didn't know. It came through dispatch as a suspected vehicle from a report in a different county." "Then you should have followed protocol," Marcus said, his voice sharp but controlled. "I presented identification. You ignored it, and now you've delayed a federal meeting, violated my civil rights, and mishandled a government asset." They were quiet. "I need my vehicle released. Immediately, and I'll need the dash cam footage. Body cam too. Send it directly to this email," Marcus continued, pulling out a card. "And if any part of it is missing, I won't just file a complaint. I'll go straight to the Internal Investigations Office." His voice wasn't angry. It was factual. He wasn't bluffing. And they knew it. What they didn't know was that Marcus had already sent a message to his team using the emergency alert system in his smartwatch. While they were fumbling with their excuses, backup had been tracking the location of his vehicle. And something strange had come up. His car had been moved again, this time to a secondary impound lot on the far edge of the city, one usually reserved for vehicles flagged for special handling. That made no sense. Unless someone outside, the station had given an order to relocate it. Marcus had friends in high places, and enemies too. He started to wonder if the SUV that tailed him wasn't just coincidence. He wondered if the stop had been more than just racial profiling. What if it was an attempt to intercept the files in his trunk? Files that included data on a recent internal breach involving possible local law enforcement links to a smuggling operation under DHS investigation. If that was the case, someone wanted him out of the way. He didn't have time to wait. He declined the ride back and called his own contact at Homeland. "I need retrieval and surveillance at Grid Point Lot 27, he said. "My vehicle may have been compromised." The response was immediate. "Copy that, Agent. Extraction team en route. Stay out of sight." He hung up and quietly slipped out of the station. No shouting, no confrontation. Just the eerie calm of a man who knew the stakes were rising. Across town, Jalen sat on the edge of his bed, still holding the note, when his phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. "You've got potential, Jalen, but the world doesn't always play fair. Be smart. We're watching in a good way. EB." He blinked, then smiled faintly. For once, it felt like someone saw him, really saw him, not as a threat, not as a kid from a struggling neighborhood, but as someone with value, with promise. But Jalen didn't know that just one train ride away, a Homeland Security agent was being followed, and that his story, his simple act of kindness, was about to intersect with a man fighting forces far more dangerous than he could imagine. The story was only beginning, and both their lives were about to change. Marcus moved through the city like a shadow now, blending into crowds and cutting through alleyways with a pace that was fast but steady. His years of field experience kicked in naturally, and every glance, every step was calculated. He was no longer just trying to retrieve his vehicle. He was trying to figure out who had orchestrated the stop, and more importantly, why. Someone had flagged his car, and that didn't just happen by mistake. He had enemies from past operations, sure, but this felt recent, targeted, designed to either delay or intercept. The files in his trunk weren't just sensitive. They contained compiled surveillance from a 2-month-long undercover operation into a suspected smuggling ring that had ties to local law enforcement. The irony wasn't lost on Marcus. The very people who'd pulled him over might unknowingly be working alongside those he was investigating. Or worse, knowingly. That possibility gnawed at him. Meanwhile, Jalen was still processing the strange new direction his life was taking. For the first time in months, he felt like someone believed in him. Not just a teacher giving a passing compliment, but someone real, someone powerful, had noticed his quiet act of kindness and wanted to help. He couldn't stop thinking about Evelyn Brooks. He had read more about her, how she had once been a lawyer fighting wrongful convictions before starting her youth outreach foundation. Her story was inspiring, but it also made him nervous. Why had she chosen him? There were dozens of people on that bus. He didn't know it yet, but Evelyn had seen something in him that reminded her of her late son. Also soft-spoken, polite, and brave. A tragic car accident had taken him years ago. Jalen's simple gesture on that crowded bus had stirred something in her that day. Maybe it was fate. Maybe it was grief looking for purpose. Either way, Evelyn wasn't just offering money. She was offering mentorship, protection, and guidance. But Jalen hadn't reached out yet. Something in him still held back, unsure if he truly deserved it, or if it was all just too good to be. True. Back in the outskirts of the city, Marcus arrived at the secondary impound lot. It was mostly empty, just a few rows of vehicles behind a tall chain-link fence. A black van was already parked near the edge, his backup. One agent he trusted, Carter, stepped out and nodded silently. "We checked the cameras," Carter said. "Someone redirected the tow order from the station an hour ago. Unauthorized. We're tracking the origin, but the digital trail's thin. They masked their login. Internal." Marcus exhaled slowly. "That confirms it. Someone on the inside doesn't want this information getting out." Carter opened the trunk of Marcus's car. The files were still there, or at least they looked untouched. But Marcus's instincts told him otherwise. Something had been moved. He popped open his encrypted briefcase and checked the hidden compartment underneath the folders. The flash drive was gone. That was the real target. Marcus clenched, his jaw. That drive had recorded conversations, hidden surveillance, and one video in particular. A hidden camera clip showing a plainclothes officer in a coded exchange with a known smuggler. If that fell into the wrong hands, not only would the case collapse, but Marcus could be framed, or worse, he wasn't safe anymore. In a small cafe across town, Evelyn Brooks sipped her tea quietly. Her phone buzzed, and she opened the message. It was from a secure contact she hadn't heard from in years. The text was simple. "DHS agent compromised. Smuggling ring spreading into city schools. Possible threat to foundation." She stared at the message, heart suddenly pounding. If the ring was branching into schools, it explained a lot, especially the uptick in unexplained disappearances of vulnerable teens. She had tried connecting the dots months ago, but without proof, there was nothing to take to the authorities. Now it was clear. Someone was trying to keep her blind. She thought of Jalen. Could he be in danger? Her instincts screamed, yes. She picked up her phone and sent another message. "Get me Agent Reed." Back at the impound lot, Marcus paced as he made a secure call to his contact inside DHS. "They've taken the drive," he said. "It's not about my identity. It's about what I saw. They don't just want the investigation buried. They want it erased." His contact on the other end, a woman named Ramos, sounded tense. "Marcus, they've already started discrediting you. An anonymous complaint just hit the system saying you fabricated evidence. You need to move fast. If they flip this narrative before you go public, you're finished." "I'm not worried about my name," Marcus replied. "I'm worried about who's next." That night, Jalen lay in bed but couldn't sleep. His mom hadn't noticed anything strange, too busy and tired from her long shift. But he kept rereading the note. He finally worked up the courage and texted the number Evelyn had left. "Hi, it's Jalen. I got your message. I don't know what to say, but thank you. The reply came in seconds. That's all you needed. To say, I want to meet you tomorrow after school, somewhere safe. Jalen agreed, unaware that someone else was already watching him. A man in a plain gray sedan had been sitting near Jalen's building for hours. He was tracking more than one person, and his orders had just changed. Marcus was now classified as a rogue agent. The conflict was bigger than a car stop. It was a cover-up, a test of loyalty. And Marcus wasn't just fighting to clear his name. He was fighting to protect the truth. And that truth was about to pull Jalen into a world he never knew existed.